His tutor, not indeed at the Oxford and Cambridge, but at the Goat's Club, this tutor was a year older than himself, a good-looking youth with fine brown eyes and smooth dark hair, a small mouth, an oval face, languid, immaculate, cool to a degree, one of those young men who, without effort, establish moral ascendancy over their companions. He had missed being expelled from school a year before Val, had spent that year at Oxford, and Val could almost see a halo round his head. His name was Crumb, and no one could get through money quicker. It seemed to be his only aim in life, dazzling to young Val, in whom, however, the Forsyte would stand apart now and then, wondering where the value for that money was. They dined quietly in style and taste, left the club smoking cigars with just 2 bottles inside them, and dropped into stalls at the Liberty. For Val, the sound of comic songs, the sight of lovely legs, were fogged and interrupted by haunting fears that he would never equal Crumb's quiet dandyism. His idealism was roused, and when that is so, one is never quite at ease. Surely he had too wide a mouth, not the best cut of waistcoat, no braid on his trousers, and his lavender gloves had no thin black stitchings down the back. Besides, he laughed too much. Crumb never laughed. He only smiled, with his regular dark brows raised a little, so that they formed a gable over his just drooped lids. No, he would never be Crumb's equal. All the same, it was a jolly good show, and Cynthia Dark simply ripping. Between the acts, Crumb regaled him with particulars of Cynthia's private life, and the awful knowledge became Val's that, if he liked, Crumb could go behind. He simply longed to say, "I say, take me," but dared not because of his deficiencies, and this made the last act or two almost miserable. On coming out, Crumb said, "It's half an hour before they close. Let's go on to the Pandemonium." They took a hansom to travel 100 yards, and seats costing 7 and 6 apiece, because they were going to stand, and walked into the promenade. It was in these little things, this utter negligence of money, that Crumb had such engaging polish. The ballet was on its last legs and night, and the traffic of the promenade was suffering for the moment. Men and women were crowded in 3 rows against the barrier. The whirl and dazzle on the stage, the half-dark, the mingled tobacco fumes and women's scent, all that curious lure to promiscuity which belongs to promenades, began to free young Val from his idealism. He looked admiringly in a young woman's face, saw she was not young, and quickly looked away. Shades of Cynthia Dark. The young woman's arm touched his unconsciously. There was a scent of musk and mignonette. Val looked round the corner of his lashes. Perhaps she was young after all. Her foot trod on his. She begged his pardon. He said, "Not at all. A jolly good ballet, isn't it?" "Oh, I'm tired of it. Aren't you?" Young Val smiled, his wide, rather charming smile. Beyond that he did not go, not yet convinced. The Forsyte in him stood out for greater certainty. And on the stage the ballet whirled its kaleidoscope of snow white, salmon pink, and emerald green and violet, and seemed suddenly to freeze into a stilly, spangled pyramid. Applause broke out, and it was over. Maroon curtains had cut it off. The semicircle of men and women round the barrier broke up. The young woman's arm pressed his. A little way off, disturbance seemed centring round a man with a pink carnation. Val stole another glance at the young woman, who was looking towards it. 3 men, unsteady, emerged, walking arm in arm. The one in the centre wore the pink carnation, a white waistcoat, a dark moustache. He reeled a little as he walked. Crumb's voice said, slow and level, "Look at that bounder, he's screwed." Val turned to look. The bounder had disengaged his arm, and was pointing straight at them. Crumb's voice, level as ever, said, "He seems to know you." The bounder spoke. "Hullo," he said, "you flows! Look, there's my young rascal of a son." Val saw. It was his father. He could have sunk into the crimson carpet. It was not the meeting in this place, not even that his father was screwed. It was Crumb's word "bounder," which, as by heavenly revelation, he perceived at that moment to be true. Yes, His father looked a bounder, with his dark good looks, and his pink carnation, and his square self-assertive walk. And without a word he ducked behind the young woman and slipped out of the promenade. He heard the word "Val" behind him, and ran down deep carpeted steps, past the chuckers out into the square. To be ashamed of his own father is perhaps the bitterest experience a young man can go through. It seemed to Val, hurrying away, that his career had ended before it had begun. How could he go up to Oxford now amongst all those chaps, those splendid friends of Crum's, who would know that his father was a bounder? And suddenly he hated Crum. Who the devil was Crum to say that? If Crum had been beside him at that moment he would certainly have been jostled off the pavement. His own father, his own! A choke came up in his throat, and he dashed his hands down deep into his overcoat pockets. Damn Crum! He conceived the wild idea of running back and fending his father, taking him by the arm and walking about with him in front of Crum, but gave it up at once and pursued his way down Piccadilly. A young woman planted herself before him. "Not so angry, darling?" He shied, dodged her, and suddenly became quite cool. If Crum ever said a word, he would jolly well punch his head, and there would be an end of it. He walked 100 yards or more, contented with that thought, then lost its comfort utterly. It wasn't simple like that. He remembered how, at school, when some parent came down who did not pass the standard, it just clung to the fellow afterwards. It was one of those things nothing could remove. Why had his mother married his father if he was a bounder? It was bitterly unfair. Jolly low down on a fellow to give him a bounder for a father. The worst of it was that now Crum had spoken the word, he realised that he had long known subconsciously that his father was not the clean potato. It was the beastliest thing that had ever happened to him, beastliest thing that had ever happened to any fellow. And downhearted as he had never yet been, he came to Green Street and let himself in with a smuggled latchkey. In the dining room his plover's eggs were set invitingly, with some cut bread and butter, and a little whisky at the bottom of a decanter. Just enough, as Winifred had thought, for him to feel himself a man. It made him sick to look at them, and he went upstairs. Winifred heard him pass and thought, "The dear boy's in, thank goodness. If he takes after his father I don't know what I shall do. But he won't. He's like me. Dear Val." End of Part 1, Chapter 2.